All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for the first session of Local Food for Local Children, the Farm to School webinar series hosted by Farms. My name is Felicity Merritt. I'm the program manager here at Farms, and I'll be facilitating this webinar series. For a little bit of quick background, Farms is a North Dakota-based nonprofit organization that focuses on support and education for small and sustainable farms. Our goal is to provide resources and training to farmers. So whether that is starting up your farm business, helping you scale up, find new markets, or helping make your business more sustainable, both for the environment and for economic viability. But this webinar series focuses specifically on farm to school, and it is geared toward specialty crop producers and direct market producers. However, if you are a processor, a school employee, or a local food advocate, I think you'll also gain a lot and learn a lot from this webinar. So we are here to support farm to school efforts, and we want to see more local food in schools in North Dakota. So to do that, we are putting on this webinar series in hopes that it will make farm to school a little bit more approachable to farmers, will help you identify the resources that you need and the next steps for selling to a school, and will show you the benefits that farm to school programs can have both on your farm business and in your community. Before we get into the content of the webinar, I'm going to quickly go over some Zoom guidelines. So participants might have noticed that when they logged in, their audio was muted and their cameras were off. Because of the way we have this webinar set up, only panelists will be able to turn on their audio or video. This just helps us cut back on any background noise. However, I do want to encourage you all to participate in this session. Our panelists are here today to answer your questions, so feel free to put questions into the chat box or use the question and answer feature in Zoom, and we'll make sure that we get your questions answered. We are also live streaming this session to Facebook. So if you're joining us via Facebook, go ahead and just leave a comment there, and we will try to address all of those questions as well. Okay, so moving on to the content of the webinar. The first thing I want to go over today is just some broad definitions and context around what farm to school is and what we mean when we say that. To help demonstrate these points, I'm going to share a video that was put together through the North Dakota Department of Agriculture.
Hi, I'm Agriculture Commissioner Doug Goring. We're assisting our local producers in connecting them to the Farm to School program. You can get involved in helping our children develop a deeper appreciation and understanding of where their food comes from and the importance of agriculture and what it brings to our lives, our community, and our economy. Thank you.
Farm to School is a collaboration between local producers and your local school district. This was our most successful year with Farm to School, and so we have 6 producers that we've worked with this year and have brought in over 800 pounds of produce between basically like September and November through November. I think it's important because it really helps to benefit both the farmers and the kids in the district. You know, anytime that we can have something fresh for them, there's a noticeable difference in the appearance of the produce that comes in, and so they notice that too. They notice the taste of it, and I think it's great that we can help out our local farmers. So when you're going to sell to a school, I guess what we like to do is kind of meet with the farmer first, or at least get to know them a little bit, talk to them, find out what they have available for us, how much they have available for us, if the time of delivery works and the quantity that we're looking for, if we can kind of come up with a time that works. And then basically, yeah, they just give us a call and let us know what they have, and we take it, we process it, and bring it out to our schools. It's pretty easy to sell to the schools once you establish that relationship.
This year we went to a farm to school meeting, and they have done a lot of work to develop the program, and we were able to kind of look at what they had done and step in and say, hey, this is something that really will work for our farm.
So compensation is based on, I guess, kind of a little bit of a procurement process. You know, we can't dictate what their prices are, but we can give them a suggested sell price to give them a little bit of an idea of where we would like our pricing to be. And basically, as long as they're kind of within that ballpark, then they're going to be good to go.
Talked to Michelle about whether we would want to have tours out at the farm, and I would love for kids to come out and see how things are grown and maybe get their hands dirty.
We have a lot of students, even though they grow up in North Dakota, they've never been on a farm. And so for them to have that experience is life-changing for them. Some of the teachers that have done farm to school tours have just said it's been absolutely phenomenal.
I think it's an important part for a child's development to have a connection with nature, and eating food is an everyday way to connect with nature. And so coming out to the farm, seeing where things are grown and getting your hands a little dirty is good for every part of the human experience, I think.
I think some misconceptions that farmers have is that it's going to be a lot of paperwork, that it's going to be a contract that they have to sign and that they have to stick to, and if they don't meet the contract, then they're going to be in trouble, and that's not the case at all. We understand that it's farming, that there's things that affect their crops, and so we understand that, and we just are willing to work with anybody. I think what I would like the producers to know is that we just want to work with them.
Okay, so one second. That is just, I hope it provided some background about what farm to school is and the different ways that farm to school could look. But I'm sure that you still have a lot of questions about the details and how to really get started with all of this. So we actually have some of the people who were involved with making that video here today to talk more about a farm to school program in our state. So the next section of the webinar is going to be a spotlight on Bismarck Public Schools. We have 4 panelists joining us today from the Bismarck area to talk about what they have done and what it takes to get a farm to school program started. So I am going to introduce Michelle Wagner, the Child Nutrition Program Director for Bismarck Public Schools, Claire Lowstuter, who is the Bismarck Local Food Coordinator, and 2 local producers, Jared Stoll and Mary Podall, who are producers at Stoll Farms. So first off, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle to introduce herself and tell us a little bit more. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks, Felicity. And thank you guys for having us today. I'm kind of excited to talk about the progress that we've made at Bismarck Public Schools with our Farm to School program. I guess just a little bit of background about Bismarck Public Schools. We are the largest district in the state. We have a little over 13,000 students within our district. We have 22 school buildings, so 16 of those are elementary And we're actually going to be adding 2 more next year. So we'll have 18 elementary buildings. And then we have 3 middle schools and 3 high schools. And typically we average around 10,000 lunches per day and about 3,000 breakfasts per day. So we're doing roughly about 13,000 meals every single day for the BPS district. So you can imagine we do go through quite a bit of food. You know, and to kind of start this off, we really focused on just elementary. We really kind of wanted to hit those younger kids with this fresh produce first. And we really weren't sure how much we could bring in. So we thought that the elementary level was a good place to start. We go through about 800 pounds of fresh produce, vegetables and fruits per week at our 16 different buildings. So there's definitely enough room for everybody, because that's not even including how much produce we would go through at the middle schools and the high schools. You can estimate probably another 800 to, I would say, 1,000 pounds per week with those schools, because their salad bars are bigger than our elementary schools. So those are kind of the numbers that we go through on a weekly basis. So just kind of how this got started was in 2018, I went out to bid for a local producer. And that's kind of how I got introduced to Jared and Mary. They were the only ones that responded to the bid, which I'm thankful for. And I know we kind of talk about the whole bid process and all the paperwork, but back in 2018, our threshold that we had to do for a bid was much lower than it is now. Right now, we can spend up to $10,000 without having to go out for an official bid. So it just makes it a lot easier for districts to work with local producers with having a higher threshold. So we've been able to pull from other farmers since we're not meeting that 10,000 per farmer for purchasing from them. But anyway, yeah, we went out to bid. Mary and Jared submitted a proposal, and we kind of worked with them the first year. We did some cherry tomatoes and some cucumbers. I think they had some issues with their tomatoes, so it ended up being cucumbers, but cucumbers by far are our elementary kids' favorite. So when we have cucumbers on the menu, we go through about 250 pounds every time. So, and we could probably put cucumbers on there every single day. They love the cucumbers. So that's definitely one of the highlights from there. Some of the other items, like I said, are the grape tomatoes, or like any of those small cherry tomatoes, slicing tomatoes we've done. We're working with Forager Farms for pea shoots, which is something that we can get year round. And so the kids have been pretty receptive to those, especially at the secondaries. We have been putting those at some of our secondary levels, but even at the elementary, the kids really enjoy them. So I would say, like, some of the challenges that we had to get this going was probably first that bid process, but hopefully that's kind of fixed itself now. I think some misconceptions that were out there was that we wanted like one farmer to provide all this produce for the school district, and we realized that that's not feasible. And so we're willing to work with multiple farmers, and if it's 5 schools get cucumbers this week, maybe another 5 schools get them the next week, and then the following week the last like 5 or 6 schools would get those cucumbers. So we're really working on trying to divide it out and spread it out throughout the district so that all students have an option to get these local products. So I think that has kind of gone over really well this year, people realizing that they don't have to provide for the entire district for an entire day or something like that. I think they also realize that if things go bad, you know, we have backups. We have US Foods that we can pull produce from. Of course, it's not as good as any of your guys's, but it's something. So that's kind of, I think, helped maybe ease some fears with the farmers too, is that if something goes wrong with your crops, it's okay. We get that, we understand it, and we still want to continue to work with you and hope for the next year things go better. I would say that, again, this has definitely been our most successful year. Like I said in the video, we've purchased over 800 pounds of produce this year from local farmers. And I really think we've adjusted our pricing to be pretty fair. Now, of course, it's not going to be farmers market pricing, but I think it's pretty close. And you guys have to think about, as a school district, you know, we're a one-stop shop. You can drop 50 pounds of cucumbers at one stop. And as long as they're good quality and look good, we're going to buy them. So it's a little one-stop shop kind of for produce when you're working with those school districts. I guess some other successes, I think, or why this year has been successful, is definitely because of Claire and Mary. Having Claire as our local foods coordinator, she's definitely made some connections and worked really hard with our producers. And then I know Mary was out there too this summer, kind of spreading the word and trying to get more producers involved. So I definitely have to thank them for their hard work that they've put in this school year, because it's definitely because of them that we've been so successful. So I guess with that, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you'd like, Felicity, or?
Yeah, I think that was great, Michelle. Thank you. I'm going to move on. You mentioned Claire. Would you be willing, Claire, to talk a little bit about your role and involvement in the farm to school process?
Definitely. So as Michelle mentioned, and you introduced me as the Bismarck Local Foods Coordinator. So it's kind of a unique position that was established a couple years ago as a partnership between the city of Bismarck, Bismarck Public Schools, and Bismarck Parks and Recreation District. They had noticed there's all these local foods things going on, but it's not necessarily being tied together. There's definitely some ways that that could be more coordinated approach. So the position started in March of 2020. And somebody else was in the role at that time, and work was kind of difficult because also in March 2020 we happened to have a global pandemic start. So they weren't able to do a lot because they really had to just focus on getting kids fed however they could with the different restrictions and stuff with COVID. So I came on March of last year, and thankfully things were slightly back to normal, and we were able to start planning for the next school year, for this current school year, and then also do some field trips. So that's one of the fun things that I get to do, is work with the producers like Mary and Jared on field trips. So we are just starting our planning for this spring right now. So that's really exciting to be able to offer that educational opportunity, because when you talk about farm to school, there's the procurement process that Michelle talked about and we talked about in the video, and then the educational aspect. I mean, we want this to be a full circle experience for the kids. So they're going out to the farm, they're seeing the chickens, they're learning where their food comes from, they're learning about soil, the whole process. And then in the cafeteria, they're seeing these fresh local items. And what I think is great too is that Bismarck Public Schools also buys, local honey and some other North Dakota products. So, but the big focus, as Michelle said, is on getting fresh produce to the elementary schools. So I've been helping with making introductions with the farmers and the public school staff. So that relationship building has been a huge part of our success, with being able to sit down with the farmers. Jonathan Moser mentioned in the video having the farm to school meetings. So we set up 4 of those, 2 in October and 2 in December. And that was a really good opportunity to invite people to come in and learn about the program and say, oh, okay, that's not what I thought it was. And this is actually something that's really doable. And then, yeah, I think just continuing to build relationships, put the word out there. We're working on a marketing campaign right now too, which is really exciting. So if there's any questions, we can definitely work on those later. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And our last panelist we have today, bringing us full circle in the farm to school process, is Mary and Jared. Would you guys take a few minutes to talk about yourselves and your involvement with Farm to School?
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Jared from Stall Farms, and my mother, Mary, is the one that does all the fun stuff of talking to people. I just like growing the plants. So I moved up here in 2017 to grow on my mother's place. We do vegetables and also value-added products like canned goods, things like that. We started wanting to work with the schools just because we saw an opportunity to bring kids to the farm and get local produce for our son going to school as well. At the time he was in grade school, so it kind of fit right in. The school has been great and they make it super easy on us. We've been working with Michelle since day one. Anything that we had questions about, she was more than happy to work around anything that happened. Like she said, we did have problems the first year. Growing tomatoes in North Dakota was a heck of a lot different from Oklahoma, where I came from. So there are a lot of challenges there, but that's one thing that's great with working with the schools is they work around us, and that's their whole goal is to get something fresh in front of the children. And that's what we wanted to help out with. I'll let my mother speak. She does more of the.
So as you know, we're kind of a family unit, and right now we're selling to farmers market and then direct market to Bismarck Co-op and some customers that have enjoyed some of the produce as well as the value added. And again, the farm to school, we jumped in without, just because I thought we needed to get some things out there and just try some things. And Michelle has been wonderful to work with. We did write a proposal, and we knew we couldn't do all of the vegetables, so we did what we thought we could. And as she said earlier, and as Jared alluded to, we were not very successful with the tomatoes that year, but the cucumbers did really well. And we were a little nervous going back to the school and, you know, saying we had a little trouble with our tomatoes, but wow, this school worked with us on what we could grow, and it was really easy. I mean, that first part, the request for proposal, may be daunting for some, but even that was easy if we had to go back to doing that. But right now, the W-9 on file with the school and good communication is what you need. And Bismarck School could use some more producers, but I'm hoping some of you that are listening in are throughout North Dakota, and it's just go talk to the school, get to the person who orders the food or the cooks, and just, you might be a market gardener, you might be like us that are trying to make a living doing that, or you might be a big farmer with just you know, the value piece of that maybe one of the other family members does with a garden or something. The schools want and need our food, and it's really the only requirement, other than getting to know your school, is a consideration for food safety. And while the schools don't require it, if you grow more than $26,000 worth of produce, you do have to follow some FSMA rules, food safety rules. Under that, you don't have to have a food safety plan, but visit with your school based on what their requirements are. They may come and visit you just to see and grow that relationship. And I would encourage you that if you do sell produce or something from the farm to the school or to the communities, that you take a look at some resources that are online, food safety, and just pull one of those examples down and go through it. You know, what's our water like? When do we have animals around that might be impactful to the garden? It's not that hard, but it's not required. And just so you know, Claire did put a note in the chat that there is FSMA training coming up March 3rd, and you can find that online, and it's free. All you have to do is register. So again, FSMA is not a requirement, but it's definitely something that makes you realize that you are handling food that kids and your community will eat. So just be a little bit safe on that. One of the things that helped us feel more comfortable with the contract and the school is the opportunity to do education. It's kind of our our value, I guess. We've done conservation education for a very, very long time, and we love agriculture. And so the opportunity to host kids to the farm happened in 2019, I believe. And we had various groups from Bismarck come out. We didn't specify a grade, just interested teachers. And we ran them through the high tunnel so they could see where the tomatoes were produced. We helped them plant a seed for something to grow. Of course, we opened we had soil around for soil health, because I'm a believer in healthy soil, healthy produce, healthy kids. And so we let them dig around for worms. And then they also got to play with the animals. We had baby sheep, we've had chickens, and we've had horses out there. So pretty fun out there. And you don't have to do that piece of it. Certainly, not everybody has a large family and can manage that. But if you do have a location, there are people around to help you. So not just selling the food, but teaching those communities around you about agriculture. And I know this, but I was still surprised at how many Bismarck kids were not directly or second generation off the farm. We were talking to students that had not been on a farm for generations. And so really enjoyable. Did we want to talk about prices?
I think she went over that pretty well.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that the schools have worked with us on prices. Maybe we didn't get what we got at farmers market, but it's so easy. It's you harvest, you clean, and you deliver, and you don't have to sit in place all day. So the prices were comparable. And I think that as time goes on, the schools also realize that the local produce, the North Dakota produce, stores better, there's less food waste. And so they don't mind spending the same amount or a little bit more for food from local as opposed to ordering it. But sometimes as a farmer, you don't have to get premium from the school because it's really easy and it's a market and you're feeding your kids, which is awesome. Thanks, Felicity. Did you want to say anything else?
Okay, thank you guys. I think that was a great introduction, and it's really inspiring to see what you guys are all doing, working together in Bismarck Public Schools. So the next kind of section I have here is open question and answer. So I'm going to just pin our videos up, and then anyone feel free to add questions in the chat box or the question and answer box on Zoom. And I'm going to kind of start with one question that I heard right away, which was, is there guidelines for like what schools are looking for produce? So Michelle, you mentioned tomatoes go over really well. Is there anything that schools are specifically looking for from local farmers?
You know, for us at Bismarck Public School, it's mostly anything that can be used on our salad bar fresh. Because we have such large quantities like squash, things like that, that we need to actually like roast or bake or something like that. We haven't quite gotten there yet. Not that maybe we won't in the future. But what we're really looking for right now is just things that we can process and put fresh into our salad bars.
Okay, awesome. And then Mary and Jared, is there anything, you mentioned that cucumbers went over really well. Is there anything else that you have had success with in the school system?
So far, we've kind of focused on the same things. That's actually been my question from the beginning to Michelle was, what do you need? How much do you need so I can try and plan for it? And we've gotten a list together that I think is really helpful. It kind of shows what they do use and how they need it processed from us before it gets to them. And that's one thing that's really been helpful to me in my planning this time of year to know what I can get to her by August and September.
Okay, I'm going to pull up the chat here. We have a couple more questions. So we have a question here about someone who's interested in offering whole grain pasta. Is there a market for that in schools as well? It says it's a dried pasta.
There definitely could be. Absolutely. Our requirements is that our pasta needs to be 51% whole grain, not the 100% whole grain. And so we have found the product that we use, and I'm only speaking for Bismarck Public Schools, to be a 51% whole grain pasta is actually a little more better received by the kids than the 100% whole grain pasta. But in a small school district, maybe that pasta would go over a little bit better. Our challenge is we have it brought in pre-cooked to save on some of that time because of the quantity that we need. And so, for Bismarck Public Schools, there would definitely have to be some different things that we would have to put into place to try to do something like that. And I think there's that fine balance of, yes, we want things healthy for our kids, but we also don't want to be feeding the trash cans. So we have to find that common ground of what's healthy and what will the kids actually eat. So whether if there's a market there, I'm sure there is out there somewhere.
Okay, we have another question around kind of what is needed as far as certification type paperwork or classes. And you mentioned that the FSMA training is not required. Is there anything specifically that what do you need before a producer can start selling to a school?
Is that for me?
I guess anyone can answer that.
I would say we're kind of working on our food safety plan because it started so small with just Jared, and then we've added on just some really small producers. We haven't been we've been out to Jared's farm and Mary's farm, and we've seen it in operation. So I think Claire and I are kind of working on trying to get together what we want to do and go out and do kind of an inspection of different places. And I think the more people that we bring on, the more important it's going to be to have that in place. I don't know, Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree. So they make it real easy. If you're a producer out there and you're small, you're a market gardener or a small producer, like I said, under the $25,000, $26,000 in profit, you don't have to have a food safety plan according to the FSMA rules for the schools. But I believe that it's really important to at least have that checklist that you go through and just helps you keep in mind some things that when you're handling produce, when you're storing produce, when you're transporting it, having a class or having a checklist that you go through really is at value added. And I think the more and more producers that we add to this, as long as we keep it simple, I think we'll find value to the schools to have some kind of checklist or a plan to certify. So not required right now, at least for Bismarck. Be sure you communicate with your local schools about what they might have, and we'll just keep working on what's easy for producers, but what makes sense for schools too.
I will add one thing to that. Having that checklist, even if you're just doing it for your own family, keeps you on track with every person that might walk in and out of that garden. And I think that's one thing that the school would be looking for, is knowing that you're following all the steps for every piece is safe from the moment it comes out of the ground to the moment it gets on their plate, making sure just those small little things that you don't even think about. If this hose has been used for something it shouldn't be or something like that, little things like that, just to keep it safe. And I think that's what the school's really looking for, just knowing that you have a plan in place to keep that safe from the moment you grow it to the moment you deliver it.
Okay, I have a question. So you had mentioned that Bismarck Public School is the largest public school district, and you are also so lucky to have a local food coordinator like Claire who can help with some of this. And this question is for any of you guys, but what is your advice to a producer in a small North Dakota town that doesn't have as many resources? Where would you suggest that they start?
In a small school district, I think you need to start with the business manager. They're probably the ones that are going to be doing the purchasing of the food. They're the ones that are like going to be monitoring contracts and things like that. So that's who I would go to, and that might even be the superintendent at a small school district. You know, they wear so many different hats. But you definitely can go knock on the door of the cook and say, "Hey, who do I talk to about this?" You know, that's probably the best place to start for a small school district.
Thank you. Anyone else have? Okay. Okay, I have a question. This one is for Claire. And it's kind of around, so you said you came on and started doing these meetings, but working with the school district and making those introductions with the producers. Can you talk a little bit why you think that was helpful and how that helped make this year with Farm to School more successful than past years?
Sure. So when I started last year, Michelle and I got together and kind of talked about a lot of the stuff we've heard today, the background, because it was all new to me. I hadn't had any idea how the schools operated as far as the meal program. So it was definitely a big learning curve for me, but Michelle was really helpful in kind of teaching me the ropes and then saying she saw this need, like to talk to the producers and kind of get past some of these misconceptions. Talk about how the bid process had changed. And so we thought, okay, let's set up some meetings for maybe late fall when harvest is done and folks have some more time. And so I had some connections through working with Bismarck at Farmers Market and being a small producer myself. And so we just tried to invite as many people as we could from our local area. And Department of Ag helped with some of that recruitment and marketing. And then even it seemed like there was a lot of interest. And so we held them in October as well as December. We really wanted to get in touch with people before they started buying seeds for this year. So we really wanted to get ahead of things this time, because last fall we were taking just what people had left over basically from farmers markets. There wasn't really, I know that, you know, Mary and Jared still wanted to work with us, but the summer was really tough with the drought. So even right before school started, they're like, not sure if we're going to have anything. And then it ended up, thankfully, September was a pretty beautiful month. So it went very well after that. So I think just giving the opportunity to sit down with producers, answer questions, share the background, kind of explain the process, helped a lot with easing their minds on, okay, so I don't have to sell like enough to feed 13,000 students every day. Because another thing Michelle and I had agreed on is like, let's just start small. Let's get what we can. Some of the schools are pretty tiny. And then some have like 500 kids. So like, but even at these big schools that have hundreds of kids, maybe they only need, I can't think of a good number right now, but it's like not 100 pounds per day of cucumbers, you know? So it's like, we were able to get in radishes, cucumbers, tomatoes, and then Gina, who works with Michelle in the purchasing side of things, would divide it up and send it out to the schools. And so I was really impressed at how much actually we were able to get out there. And then too, Gina's another key player in all of this. She would be the one that was actually taking the deliveries. And she's just so friendly and easy to work with. And people were really pleased at how that process went too. So we had some really good feedback from producers. So I think just, again, teamwork and building relationships has been our biggest success.
Thank you. We have a question from Facebook here. Would there be a potential for some school food service people who are coming be able to come back to work before school starts in the fall to process or freeze some vegetables?
As far as my staff goes, maybe. I think the question we run into is how much can we get and then where are we going to store it? Our freezer space is pretty limited. So I'm not sure exactly how it would work, but maybe. I think at a smaller school, definitely, you know, if you work with those cooks and you find out what they can do and what they can hold, there's probably potential there for that.
I have another question kind of along this same vein. So Jared had mentioned that mentioned August and September. Do schools, like, do you buy for summer school? Is it only for the school year? And like maybe talk about how that works out with the growing season versus like when school is in session. And again, I guess maybe Michelle, do you buy it for the summer or is it just the regular school year?
We've done it just for the regular school year, only because of like you said, the growing season doesn't really match up. You know, our summer feeding starts like June 6th and it's done by the middle of July. But that's not saying that we wouldn't if there was people that had high tunnels and could get stuff going so that we could have it in June, we would definitely purchase it. It just hasn't worked out so far yet.
Well, and I was just thinking, Michelle, before you've mentioned that the staff is pretty limited for summer feeding, and then it's got to be, and something we haven't mentioned, processing has to be done in a certified commercial kitchen or in the school's kitchen. And so it's got to, like for the summer feeding program, it would have to be something that was like just ready to go. Like they don't need to hardly touch it at all, you know? So that's kind of tough too, is like what's ready in July that would fit all of those specs. So, but yeah, it's definitely like, I know Michelle's been pretty flexible and we're trying to see how we can expand it all the time.
For Mary and Jared, how long into the school year are you selling product, and like how long does that kind of revenue keep coming, and when is it? I guess it depends every year. That's what farming is, but about like how many delivery or how many months are you selling to that school?
We're going to push it out as far as we can. Obviously, the freeze is kind of our cutoff date every year. Kind of figure in for about 6 weeks is for how I plan it every year. They start late in August, get all of September, and hopefully get at least a couple weeks in October. Doesn't always work out that way. But that's kind of how I base my plans on it, is just knowing for that. And I'm trying to get some stuff running. Hopefully Michelle will be ready for some stuff this spring before school gets out, if I can make it work.
We'll see.
The next question we have here is also kind of around the timing of things. So there's a few questions in here, but I'll start with this first one. When is a good time for a farmer to approach the school? And when is a good time for a school to approach farmers?
Well, to build a relationship anytime, but if you want to plan for your season, in the past years, we were looking at January ordering seeds and planning, but this last year, Jared started early planning. So it's been helpful to get to know the school and what they need. So if you're just starting out, just go introduce yourselves and do what you can the first year. But then schools, you know, really to have their thought process as early as October, November, and December, to start having conversations about what they can accept and what size they need and what they can process, will allow a producer in December and January then to really plan his or her produce garden the next year.
And then, Michelle, is there, like you said, is there a deadline where you need to know whether you're going to be getting produce from a farmer? Like, how flexible is that?
I guess we've kind of done like 1 week or 2 week notice. It is nice, just because usually we have to place an order with US Foods 1 week prior to when we would receive it. So if we know that Jared's going to bring, 100 pounds of cucumbers, then we, like that week before, then we know not to order from US Foods, or maybe we only have to order another 100 pounds from US Foods. So that's kind of our cutoff. It's not like we need to know like months in advance. Basically it's a 2 week window is kind of what we ask for, and we can do a week's notice. So.
Okay. And the second part of this question, is there a time of day that's best for communicating with schools, or is there a preferred method? Like, should you call, email, or show up in person?
Well, don't come over lunchtime. Cooks are busy then. For us, we run a little bit different because we have a few layers in our department, so Gina Wood is in pretty early in the morning, and so she can go in and accept those orders, anywhere from like 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, and she's there till about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So if you're in a smaller school, if you're looking at smaller school districts, just kind of think of like, when do you think is their go time? If they serve at 11, they're going to have to cook about an hour before that. Then they have cleanup an hour after. Just kind of working with the cooks and finding out when is a good time for them, I guess. So probably either early morning or after lunch would be my suggestions.
Deb, you had your hand up. Did you want to add to this question?
Well, I wrote it into the chat, but I just did a little survey on when they would like to have training, and a whole bunch of them put that 9 to 10 in the morning would be a good time. So that makes me think that's when they're pretty free. They've finished up breakfast and they're not hot and heavy into lunch right then. I would say the worst time to ever approach a school is in August when they just opened. They will throw tomatoes at you if you bring some. They're so busy. But the rest of the year, just when school first opens, they are swamped. After that, they settle down a little bit.
Okay, thank you. That is really helpful. I'm going to ask if we have any last questions. We can maybe do one more, and before we move on, is there anything else? Okay. All right. Well, if you do come up with questions, even between now and our next session, feel free to write them down or email them to me, and I can make sure that we get those on the list for the next session. So, and thank you to all of our panelists today for talking about what you're doing and your efforts. And I think that is really exciting. And I hope that we can see more of that in our schools. Another local farm to school effort that I wanted to highlight is the recent beef to school efforts that have been happening in North Dakota. So this is just another example of how farm to school can look. So I'm going to share a news story here featuring South 40 Beef, who you actually will hear from John in our session next week.
North Dakota may be known as cattle country, but that doesn't mean the beef our kids eat in school is locally raised. A group of ranchers is hitting the road hoping to change that, one school at a time. Jody Kurzman explains.
It's delivery day for John Rosweck. Up before the sun, he'll spend this day delivering North Dakota beef to North Dakota schools.
Very passionate about getting North Dakotans to eat, North Dakota beef and to support our ranchers.
Rosweck operates South 40 Beef in Mott, a USDA certified meat processing plant. He's partnered with the Independent Beef Association of North Dakota to get local beef into schools.
And we've been talking about this for years of why we aren't providing our schools with good, nutritious, state-grown beef.
IBAND donated 1,000 pounds of North Dakota produced ground beef to 12 schools across the state. Rosweck has already delivered to a few, including Fargo Public Schools, who are on board to purchase more.
We actually received feedback already, from the chef that it smells like beef, it cooks like beef.
The goal of this project? To teach kids some important lessons about where their food comes from, and to encourage more schools and more North Dakotans to shop local.
That's our next generation that we're hoping to buy beef.
By buying local beef, you could be saving your neighbor.
In Bismarck, I'm Jody Kurzman, reporting for your news leader.
If you'd like to
I have another quick clip I want to show before we talk a little more about beef to school. And I chose this one because it also features a panelist who will be talking in our next session.
I'm with the State Department of Public Instruction. In child nutrition, I'm an assistant director that oversees school lunch programs. And it came to me through just a voicemail that Jeremy left with another person in DPI, and then that person sent it to Linda, my boss, and then it came to me. So then I called Jeremy, and he asked if we could get North Dakota beef into North Dakota schools. Could we start a program? And I told him, we don't need to start a special program. We can do it. It's allowed. It just has to be processed at USDA inspected meat plants. And so then he said, oh, can we have a meeting? And he brought some of his friends, ranchers, up to the Capitol. We had a really, really good meeting. It was absolutely sheer coincidence, but our Fargo food service director called my cell phone while we were in this meeting about the milk carton shortage. And I just said, would you be interested in some local beef? And I told her the price, and she was like, oh yes, that would be really good. So she actually purchased some, and then we talked about the donations for the other schools to try it out. And donations are fine, but I told the guys, I'm not real keen on just donations. I don't want them to think that you will always donate. What we really need to do is start a market that you can sell to the schools. And they were very excited about that, because already the people they've donated to have called and asked if they can buy something. So.
Okay, so I chose those two clips just because I think we heard a lot of really exciting stuff happening in Bismarck, but I want to highlight that farm to school is not a one specific thing. So if you are a producer or a processor in North Dakota, there is a market in local schools for you. And I also specifically like that clip because, like I said, we will have both Deb and John joining us for our next session. Our next session, as a quick reminder, is going to be on Monday, February 28th. And I'm hoping that during this session, you got a little bit of a background on farm to school, and you can see some of the benefits that it can have on your farm and your community. And I hope you're excited to learn more, because our next session, we're going to talk with Deb about kind of that initial meeting with your school and some of those questions to go through. And then we have a panel of North Dakota producers and processors who have all been involved in farm to school efforts throughout the state in kind of different ways. So they'll be telling you all the ways that farm to school can look, and they'll be here to answer your questions about getting started. I also want to tell you guys that we'll be sending out links to a resource document and then linking to some of the things I shared today. And so the email that you registered for the webinar with, I'll be sending some material to you. And I encourage you to look through that and kind of think of your questions before the next session. And then you also have that if you decide to move forward with Farm to School. The last thing I want to remind you guys, and we did talk about this briefly, it is the upcoming Local Food and Pride of Dakota Conference that is happening in Mandan and hosted by the North Dakota Department of Agriculture on March 4th and 5th. So this is free for North Dakota producers. You just need to register online. And we are having a session hosted by Claire about Farm to School. So this will be a really great opportunity for you to follow up with everything you've learned in the webinars and kind of meet some people in person to build those connections and kind of make the next steps in Farm to School. That same weekend, the day before, like we mentioned, is the FSMA Producer Safety Training course. And I believe that we have links to register for that in the chat as well. So if you are thinking about pursuing Farm to School, that might be a really good chance for you to get that training in so that you don't have to worry about it moving forward. Like we said, it's not necessarily required, but it will be a really good chance to have that just for your peace of mind and for the school as well. All right, well, thank you again to all of our panelists for being here. I really appreciate you guys sharing about what you're doing, and thank you to all the attendees who are interested in getting local food to local children in our state. I will see you back here on Monday, February 28th at 12 p.m. Central Time.